A little more than a month ago, I made a video regarding Cyno, where I talked about how I think he's underrated. Back then, I didn't expect him to come back so soon, but I would have waited a bit before releasing that video. Essentially, what I said there is that he's a quite good unit, mainly for his quick bloom potential, although his quicken compositions are no slouch either. Since you already know what I think about him if you saw that video and the on-field carry tier list I released earlier this week, I used this other video to tackle a more specific question, namely whether or not he's worth pulling for. As I mentioned earlier, Cyno's potential as a carry totally lies in his quick bloom and quicken performance, two team concepts that have great structure, which I analyzed in the last video I made as well. Cyno is rather infamous for how long his rotations are, as he is forced to stay around 15 seconds on field whenever he uses his burst, if he wants to recover enough energy to use it in the next rotation. In the other Cyno video I made, I explained how, at least from a damage output standpoint, having that field time restriction is not a big deal, unlike some believe, as there are ways to modify team rotations to make units like Fischl and Kazuha fit decently with him regardless on quickened teams, and for quick bloom teams it's not an issue at all, since his damage window aligns with Shinsho's and Cookie's abilities by default in that case. So, if it's true that Cyno can do well in those teams, the question here is how he stacks up to other great options for that role, and whether or not he's worth pulling for you based on that. By fitting on Quicken and Quick Bloom specifically, Cyno overlaps with the latest addition to Dendro teams, Haitham, from a team building standpoint. In fact, despite being notoriously compared to Keqing in the past, that comparison is only relevant for Quicken teams, as Keqing just isn't that great of a fit for Quick Bloom teams due to lack of elemental mastery scaling, and overall worse damage performance than Cyno. If on the other hand, you're purely interested in Quicken teams, then Keqing is a more than viable alternative to Cyno, as she perfectly fits with Fischl's rotations, and doesn't suffer from a long damage window like Cyno does, which makes her better in multi-wave content. This last factor is Cyno's Achilles heel in particular, since, based on how Nahida's off-field Dendro application works, it will only apply on marked opponents, meaning that in multi-wave content, you have to swap back to Nahida and reapply her skill on all opponents to maintain Quicken or Quick Bloom uptime. While that's technically a Nahida issue too, it's also true that most other Quicken options either have much shorter damage windows than Cyno, or shorter rotations in general, so they don't feel that problem nearly as much as he situationally does. In practice, on Quicken, Cyno will feel like a sidegrade to Keqing in boss rooms, and a downgrade in multi-wave content. The Quick Bloom part is a bit more favorable for Cyno. My favorite Quick Bloom compositions with him is Cyno, Cookie, Shinsho and Nahida, as it's probably the best Cyno composition in terms of durability mixed with damage dealt. The comparisons here can be drawn with Haitham Quick Bloom comps, and if you want, even a traditional Nahida Hyper Bloom, since at the end of the day Quick Bloom is just a small variation of that theme. These compositions all have similar raw damage performance. In my calculations, Nahida and Haitham Quick Bloom have slightly higher damage ceiling, but it's a difference that's barely noticeable in real game scenarios, as in my experience, if there isn't a 10,000 DPS difference or higher between teams, generally, what determines the better performance is the utility levels of those teams. Sadly for Cyno, Dendro on-fielder variants of Quick Bloom are generally more flexible than his variant, even ignoring Haitham's capability to split rotations, as doing that on Quick Bloom can easily desync the duration of your Electro or Hydro applicator's skills with Haitham's actual field time. The latter's capability to apply Dendro just allows him to save a big chunk of the team damage even if Nahida's elemental skill isn't up at a given time, while for Cyno, all Dendro related damage is lost in that case. To expand on this, as I mentioned earlier, Haitham is a character that overlaps with Cyno pretty significantly. The biggest issue is how much they both rely on Nahida for Quick Bloom teams, which makes it a bit hard to make two separate teams for Haitham and Cyno for an Abyss run, especially since Haitham has high reliance on Nahida for his Quicken compositions too. Basically, it's unlikely that you'll find unique use cases for Cyno in your account, and you will realistically struggle to run them on separate teams simultaneously as well. If you only have Nahida, meaning the only competition in your account for Cyno is standard Hyperbloom, then pulling for aim makes more sense. I will still say the comp with Dendro on fielder, so Hyperbloom has practical advantages over Cyno Quickbloom comps, but the second team frees up one between Xingqiu and Yelan compared to the first, which can be quite significant depending on who you have on your account. Still, Cyno would count as a luxury pull regardless in this case, as he doesn't bring anything innovative to that comp in particular. As a whole, while Cyno is definitely a character you can use on Dendro teams with great results, these team structures are so good that you will be able to maintain similar, if not better results with several other options as well, which makes him fall into the pull if you like him range. I'm done for today. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe. See you next time!